While on deployment in Iraq, Army Sergeant Eric Donoho survived an explosion, then another 3 months later, and another one 8 months later after that. His brain was so badly mangled that he could barely form sentences. And even worse than the physical damage was the moral injury.
After surviving multiple explosions in war and diagnosed with brain trauma and PTSD, Eric Donoho's military career as a U.S. Army sergeant was over. Thrust back into civilian life, Eric was forced to face the pain of losing children, countless friends, and possible divorce. With no fight left in him, Eric desperately wanted relief. Sitting at his kitchen table, he put a gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger, but it wouldn't fire. He tried again and again, still nothing. In his book, Canyon of Hope, Eric shares his harrowing story of walking through darkness to finding light, and he wants to help others do the same.
Well, I'm so honored to say that Eric Donoho is here with us live on the 700 Club. Eric, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you all for having me. It is an honor to be able to share this message with your audience and to talk about how my faith has changed my life.
Yes, well, let's get into your story. You obviously talk a lot about, and people know that veterans can struggle, a lot of them with PTSD, but you point out through your story something different that a lot of people, even myself before I read your book, like I'd never heard of this before, but it makes total sense. It's called moral injury. Can you first tell us what that is?
Yeah, so moral injury, they define it as, a harm to that moral compass that directs your life. For me, as I started to dig into it, it was clear that it was dealing with the spiritual aspect of our lives and how that directs us and moves us forward. So in essence, for me growing up in Catholic faith for my whole life, I had that faith, but I didn't have the understanding of that life can be hard and that if you're not prepared for it and have the strong understanding of that faith, those injuries can hurt your spirit in the same way that, they can hurt your mind.
Can you give an example of maybe something that either you experienced or a buddy, a former vet experienced that, further explains moral injury?
I think there are lots of extremes that have been given out there. For me, it was the little daily chinks in the armor. So being on patrol and seeing a man hit his wife because he didn't feel like she was working hard enough, or their kids, or some sort of issue like that in America, someone would go to jail for, or you could intervene and stop. When you're in war, you have a clear ROE, rules of engagement, you have expectations, and you were not allowed to intervene in those type of situations because of what it could cause on a larger scale. So each time you have to walk away, that is like that hit to that spiritual core of who you are. And if you get enough of those, it becomes damaged, just like, a broken bone or a leg.
Yeah. Well, does the military train active duty service members to deal with that, or is it not really talked about?
I would say it's not talked about at all. The reality is that the chaplains within the military do a great job of trying to, they have a few programs that they all talk about, and if you're seen and involved with the chaplains themselves, then that's how I learned it, and that's how I started to process my way through it. But for the overall message out there, no, most guys that I talk to will have gone to PTSD training or therapy just like me for years and will have no success, and they feel like a failure. And the reality is moral injury is an injury that all the symptoms that manifest from it are the same as PTSD. So you can be dealing with both at at the same time. They usually run concurrent. But if you're not dealing with solutions that heal both, you won't actually feel like you're making progress. So for me, as soon as I started to deal with that moral injury, all of that PTSD therapy and tools that I learned just kind of fell into place.
Right, you were able to get to the root of the issues.
Yes.
Well, I wanted to also talk about, you know, you faced you were involved in 3 explosions, and that actually forced you to get out of the military. Can you talk about, you know, what happened after you got out? Like, what was it like going back into civilian life? Because I'm a military kid, so my dad was in the Navy for 30 years, so that transition can be tough in general. But you and your wife were really going through some challenges. What were some of those things?
Yeah, so when I came home, I ended up being navigated to a program called Warrior Transitions Unit and retired out of the military. And everyone was like, oh, Eric, it's going to be better. You're going to have time to decompress and you're going to, you know, find some peace. And that's if life decides not to hit. Right. And so for me, almost immediately, my wife, we were getting in shape for a retirement trip, and she tore her Achilles tendon, and then she ended up, we ended up having another miscarriage, and then she ended up having breast cancer. So it was just one thing almost, you know, every few months we were getting hit with something in life, and then trying for me on my end to have all of those challenges from war and not let them interfere in how I'm trying to support my wife.
But you also were diagnosed with cancer.
I was. So a few years back, I got told that I had thyroid cancer.
Oh my goodness.
Which was related to the burn pits that we are all, you know, were around and forced to live next to.
Wow. Well, you hit rock bottom 6 years after you had gotten out of the military, and you're very open and honest about that moment. Can you just share what was going on during that time?
Yeah, I mean, so because I was dealing with the wrong injury, I wasn't getting better. And when you're dealing with PTSD and dealing with moral injury, one of the things that you try to do is control the scenarios so that, you know, you can control the outcomes, because it's fear that's driving all of this. And in doing that, you know, I had pushed my wife and kids away. They didn't really like to be around me. I wasn't fun. And in the process of that, my wife was at her end and she wanted a divorce. And so because I hadn't realized I was suffering from this injury, I found myself at the kitchen table feeling like a failure and wanting to end my life. Fortunately, that day, for whatever reason, while the round was loaded in the gun, it would not fire. I'd take and clear the round, and the trigger would squeeze easily. But as soon as the round was in the chamber, I could not squeeze that trigger.
So you tried to kill yourself?
Actively. And, you know, and I would like to say that that would be the only time, but that would be a lie. This has been a struggle for, had been a struggle for a number of years. This was the moment where I didn't want to make it back from. So. Yeah.
And after that, I mean, you're very open and honest. I mean, you go and pick up your kids.
Yes.
And it's just like life as usual, but then you had a conversation with a buddy that really led you down a path of healing.
So 2 days after that suicide attempt, I found out that my first platoon sergeant in the military, the one who made sure I was home for the stillbirth of my son, David, he had taken his own life. And we had kind of fallen out. I mean, as you do in the military, you just kind of go separate ways. And I found myself really angry. And the irony that I was about to just do that to my family and friends hit me like a ton of bricks. And so I couldn't sleep that night, and Rocky was on TBS, and there is that moment where he talks about nobody's gonna hit as hard as life. And it was kind of a light bulb, and so I called my friend Brent, who I knew would be the only person up, and I unloaded probably years worth of things that I kept in that jar. And in the beginning, it was a little awkward, but, you know, I'll say to anyone out there that's struggling, the person on the other end will always be there.
Yeah.
You know, if you're willing to open, they'll listen, and they'll find a way to navigate through that hard conversation to make you feel loved, because that's what Brent did for me that day.
Yeah. Thank you so much for just being honest. I wish we had more time, but I wanted to ask you this. How did you discover the Canyon of Hope, which is the title of your book?
I was on my first expedition with No Barriers Warriors, and we were in a canyon walking along the West Fork Gila River, and it wasn't lost on me that the environment around me painted the picture of how I saw my life myself. And for me, I was walking in the shadows, but there was light at the end. And it was on that journey that I found my experience with God and my faith in a way that I had never experienced before, and which is what led to the book and me being here today.
Yeah. Wow, Eric, I just wanted to say thank you so much for just being so transparent about your journey. And yeah, we just thank you. We praise God for all that you're doing, because you've done amazing things too, which we didn't get time into, but you've passed legislation to help, veterans, and you're so passionate about that. So thank you so much for everything you're doing and for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Well, you can read more about Eric's story in his brand new memoir. It's called Canyon of Hope, and it's available nationwide. I'm serious. Everyone, go get a copy of this book. It is so, so good.